Hey there, my name is Alex, I am the Silver Mont, and in this video we're going to talk about changes we'd like to see in Final Fantasy XIV. Features, large or small, that would improve the game. Now of course I'd love to see what you guys think the game needs, but I'll largely be talking about some of my own ideas in this video. 5 of them, as that seems like a good number to prevent it from becoming a 3-hour long video. Although these 5 are not in any particular order. That said, let's hop right into it. As far as new jobs go, a judge seems like it would be an interesting one to me. Not an inventive one, I'll admit, but I think it would be a popular one. Sharing maiming armor with Dragoons is a no-brainer, and I feel like they could be a tank supporting melee DPS. What I mean by tank supporting is, the judge would have something a little like how the dancer picks a dance partner, but the judge would put it on a tank, whoever they think is going to be taking damage. When this target takes damage, it would fill a specific meter that lets the judge unlock various judgment abilities, be it punishing the one inflicting damage or supporting the one taking damage. Obviously, it doesn't have to be on a tank, but the idea is you'd put it on your main tank, the person who's taking damage. If you're playing solo, then I suppose you would have it on yourself. Or if you don't have it on anyone else, it would automatically be on yourself, something like that. The other idea I have for such a job would be that, although their primary weapons are a set of swords, they would also have other weapons they use for one-off attacks. For example, maybe one of their off-global cooldown abilities would be to draw or summon up a two-handed sword and deal a large attack. Maybe their AoE off-global cooldown would be a spear that they spin around. You get the idea. Maybe that's not really much of a specifically judge thing, but I think it would be a cool mechanic and not too unusual for a judge. A judge has to hand out a sentence fitting of the crime, right? You take it from that and you go, they use the right weapon for the right situation. Bit of a stretch, sure, but I think it would be very cool. Finally, I think they should have either an invincibility button or a full block duration buff sort of thing. The idea behind this being that they can tank for a very short period of time. I know 14 seems very rigid in its job structure right now, but I enjoy the idea of people being able to desperation tank, a ninja tanking by dodging. If you're playing solo content, then you can just use it whenever you need a bit of extra defense. If you're in a group content and your tank dies, maybe both tanks die, then the judge can take the enmity using this ability for a few seconds whilst the healers bring people back to life, you know? In terms of DPS though, I figure they'd be on the lower end of things, but make up for it by bringing interesting abilities to the party. Again, I suppose you could liken them to a melee version of a dancer in that sense. Plus, you know, judges have awesome looking armor. As for the other jobs, well, I'd like to see some sort of healer that works like a chemist or something. If you get married in 14, you get the wedding ring, the eternity bond, eternity band, whatever. You can use this item to teleport to your chosen partner. This is great, but I think a good addition to the game would be something similar that works with friends. Think of it like an item that sits either in your key items inventory or armory chest, and when you hit it, it transports you to your friend. To get this item, you would need to complete a quest chain with your friend. Or maybe they could make a craftable version for crafters to sell on the market board, I don't know. I prefer the quest idea. Completing the quest grants you the item, and then you can teleport to each other once every 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, whatever. If you do the quest again with someone else, it adds them to the item, meaning when you click it, you have a sub-menu, wherein you can choose which friend to teleport to. It would share the cooldown, as it would be tied to the actual item, so you can't teleport from one friend then to another one without the big cooldown. And you could register like, I don't know, 3, 5 friends to it, something like that. It's a small feature, one that I think would be really nice, as the quest itself could be a fun little adventure to embark on, with a simple but useful reward. It could tie into some sort of friendship system wherein playing with friends gives you small rewards the more you do it, or even just a way to track the stats of that. Think of how Unity works in Monster Hunter World, for example. You don't really get anything for Unity, but it shows you how much you've played with someone. There could be no rewards at all, but I'd like to track it so that I can see how many times me and my friend have cleared dungeons, you know? I can see, oh, me and my friend have beaten 100 dungeons together, 200 trials, you know? It's a social game, and whilst kinda pointless, I think features like these are nice to include, if only just for flavour. Now this is more of a graphical option, and it's one you might not have even noticed, but the aliasing in Final Fantasy XIV is really bad. In areas like the Black Shroud, trees and foliage are extremely aliased because the game's anti-aliasing options just aren't good enough. Distant textures on the ground and whatnot can be very ugly. At times it's been possible to force this somewhat at a hardware or driver level, but it never provides a perfect solution. I'm not an expert on this topic, but I believe that Final Fantasy XIV only really offers post-processing anti-aliasing. If you aren't aware, anti-aliasing is essentially the problem of square pixels. If you take a bunch of squares, put them in a diagonal line, it's not going to look smooth, right? So when you have things like trees or bushes, they can shimmer, they can look very sharp. FFXIV essentially tries to improve this by blurring the image. It's very performance friendly as it's just post-processing, it's just like slapping a blur over what you're looking at. Then you have things like MSAA and whatnot which try to effectively increase the internal resolution but downsample it to your output resolution to make the image appear cleaner. In 14's case, I believe it's an issue with the engine and it doesn't really seem to support any, what would you call it, hardware or engine level solution for these jagged and to the point shimmering images. They can only slap a filter over it after the fact. It won't bother some people, but it drives me insane and I really think the game needs some sort of rendering update or engine update to improve it, so we can have foliage and forested areas that look great. On that note, it would be nice if we could have some more cape and cloth physics. Do you remember Odin's armour? That was supposed to have his cloak with full physics, but it was unable to be implemented, presumably because of the PS3. Well, the PS3 is no longer supported, and the PS4 can probably be dropped in the near future. Give us some PC and PS5 options that we can turn on, if we have the hardware for it. Dragoon is both my favourite job in 14, and one of the most frustrating that I don't really play much. Whilst it has varied over the years in terms of power, I'm talking more about the job fantasy as a whole. What would you say is the job fantasy, the class fantasy for Dragoon? Generally it's either a dragon slaying knight or a dragon riding knight, a dragon knight. The signature abilities are things like jump, which in almost every Final Fantasy game I've seen it in, it's used to miss a turn in combat, wherein you're immune to damage, and then come back down and deal some damage, or some variant therein. Yet in 14, the Dragoon's jumps are clunky and have caused more deaths for Dragoons over the 7 years the game's been running than the 1,000 years war between Ishgard and Nidhogg. Basically, jumps probably cause more deaths than dragons. Jump needs to be implemented in such a way that it can be used to avoid attacks. Likewise, it shouldn't just be an animation. The movement parts of it need to be updated. Have you ever tried to use elusive jump near a ledge and witnessed the game have, like, a stroke? Yeah. In addition, Blood of the Dragon as a whole needs a rethink or a rework. The idea of channeling the power of a dragon makes sense, but having it drop because of a long transition period in a boss fight isn't fun. Either give Dragoon something like an Atman or meditate, or just change the meter. I like the idea of it being a buff or a debuff where it gradually increases until it reaches the point where you're doing, just as an example, 50% more damage but taking 50% more damage. Then you can end it or reset it by using Nastron or something. Now obviously that specific example introduces its own problems, as it would mean lots of Dragoons either do no damage or they die a lot. So maybe that's not the best thing for a game like Final Fantasy XIV. Although if they ever made like a action game where you play as like Estinian or some other Dragoon, then that'd be a perfect idea. Risk and reward. In general though, Dragoon needs something to improve the idea of the job fantasy. I can play a lot of jobs in 14 and I feel like they fulfill that job fantasy, like a samurai, a ninja, a gunbreaker, a black mage. But then other jobs like monk, dragoon and summoner, I don't really get that. They just feel off to me, and Dragoon in particular, mostly because it's my favourite. Jumps need adjusting. The fact that they keep speeding up jumps means they are aware of the problem that jumps present, but their only real solution so far has been to speed them up so there's less chance of you being walloped. And I'm not a huge fan of that. Jumps aren't meant to be like super fast things. I don't know if it's a game engine limitation or what, but they really need to do something about this. Finally, one of the biggest problems I see from new players in 14 is how boring the game's combat can be at low levels. You have to wait until level 20 roughly for most classes before you even have your basic 1-2-3 combo, and then you need to get level 30 before you can get your job. I know the issue is, well, you have 80 levels, we can't give you all the abilities instantly. That's a fair point. But really, if you think about it, a lot of jobs don't even come together until level 50, then you build upon that framework, right? The idea is that leveling prepares you for playing your job endgame. But how can you do that if you don't even really get your job properly until endgame? And in some cases they change drastically even after the fact. I remember back in, Stormblood I think it was, playing Summoner up to maybe level 60 roughly was one way, then like after level 60 when you got your capstone from 60 it like completely changed how the class played. We really need some adjustments to these lower levels so that new players don't spend hours just going 1, 1, 1, 1 over and over. Likewise, we need, when we level sync down for dungeons, why on earth do we lose our abilities and have to go back to mashing 1? It would be too easy if we had level 80 abilities at level 20. In a sense, yes it would, but level 20 dungeons are already so easy that you genuinely have to try to die in them. Any dungeon before level 50 is almost comical. When's the last time you saw someone die in a place that wasn't, Aurum Vale? So they'll go from easy to easier, and obviously you'd sink down the strength of these abilities as you do with the basic ones. The start of an MMO is a very important time. It's where you draw the player in, you enrapture them in this fantasy world, whether it's the story, combat, the graphics, whatever, the social elements. But in 14, so many people seem put off by the combat, which does play a big role in an MMO, as it is your primary way of advancing your level. And when it is, slow, people go, oh, the giant global cooldown. Because yeah, at level 80 you don't notice that because you have so much going on, but at lower levels it can really feel like just 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, whilst you're also going through the story, which is pretty slow paced at the start. There's not too many exciting things going on. And I was fine with the slow story. The filler, yeah, not so much, but they more or less removed that now. But the slow combat and the slow story combine to make a lot of players just feel like, what's the point, I think. So if you make the combat a bit more exciting, give them a bit more to do. Obviously you can't throw everything at a new player, but let it slowly ramp up a little more than it does right now. Perhaps the ideal solution is to give us most of our 1 to 50 abilities by level 30, and at least our 1-2-3 combo by level 10, and introduce new cosmetic abilities that we can unlock, some other form of customization that works as we level up. WoW, for example, has talents. I don't think 14 needs those, and I don't think they really are great in World of Warcraft because people just Google what is the best talent build and they use that for the most part. But cosmetic abilities, now that's an idea. There's a lot of old ability animations that have been removed from the game. How about if once we hit level 60 on our Dark Knight, we can swap out the animation for Soul Eater, our current combo ender, with Power Slash, if you remember Power Slash. I don't see any downside to this. Sure, some animations might not fit as well in a combo string or for the attack in question, but I bet if you tried, you could find a lot of skills that could easily swap out animations with each other. Swap out Delirium with the old Dark Arts animation, for example. They both work fine for that ability. If you really want to be cynical, we could say they could put in cash shop animations too, but let's not think about that. I just like the idea of having these different things. Maybe black mages could have yellow lightning or blue lightning, maybe green lightning, who knows? Another option is having a level squish, meaning that right now the game goes from 1 to 80. We could squish it so that, it goes from 1 to 50 again, so that when you're level 30, you're basically, at the end of A Realm Reborn. It's one option. I don't think it's necessarily the best right now, but it might be an option for the future. Because as you have more and more levels, they start to lose their meaning. When World of Warcraft is like, oh, go to level 120, it's like, what? No, these numbers, at a certain point, the numbers lose any meaning. When you're critting for like 3.2 billion damage, you might as well be critting for 3.2 damage, you know? I think 14 could end at level 90, 99, 100, but if we ever get past that point, then really, yeah, we need a level squish past that point. But that about does it. What would you like to see? A few suggestions I got from people I asked were being able to do dungeons with trusts, for example. In Shadowbringers, we use trusts to play through dungeons for the first time when going through for the plot. My friend wants to be able to do that for A Realm Reborn, Heaven's Ward, Stormblood, and I agree that's a good idea. Definitely one that can be implemented too. Another friend wanted the ability to do some of these solo duties with friends, and another friend wanted more Eureka-style, high-player content, which I can definitely get on board with. I like the idea of Eureka, though I didn't really like how it became fate trains all day. But I love the idea of having a big zone where all players can work towards a common goal, even if they aren't grouped up even. What if we have a big castle to attack? Solo players can help by attacking defenders. Big groups could take on stronger enemies, crafters can create siege weapons, and gatherers can gather resources, and when the gates are open, all players can rush in, fight a big boss, everyone gets the credit. Maybe that's pretty similar to the whole Resistance Bosia stuff coming, but there's a lot of other Final Fantasy XI or Eureka style content one can think up too. But yes, what would you like to see added into Final Fantasy XIV? Let me know down in the comments, and until next time, thank you so much for watching, ciao.